There's also a reason that society teaches us to fear aging. And it's exactly what you were saying. We become so wise and so clear and focused and intuitive, and we are remembering our gifts. And a patriarchal structure has really needed us to be afraid of that, right? And feel a lot of shame around that. And when we're feeling all these things, it's like, no, you're just crazy. It's your hormones. And it's like, no, this is me remembering my power. And we really need to fear that as, a society that doesn't want women to remember how powerful they are.
To come into more of the healthy and whole feminine is to not disregard the masculine. It doesn't work that way.
There's an incredible power that comes from reclaiming our sexual energy and really being in the space of like, my sex belongs to me, and not in any way with any sort of like contempt or malice for anyone. It's just in the space of rediscovering my magic and a love affair with myself and being in this skin.
This is the Roxanne Show. Get ready. It's time to rise. Why, Dene? Do people need to listen to this episode, regardless of they are in a partnership or relationship or not?
Oh, why? I feel like we need these conversations more than we ever have, to be honest. And to me, when I talk about love and relationships, I'm really talking about the relationship with ourselves, which I think love and our attempt to connect with other people is always a mirror showing us to ourselves. And so I think there's just a way that we are collectively reframing what it is that we're doing in these bodies, who we want to be as a human race. And we're sort of in a time of reckoning, right? With what I think about, and the book that I wrote talk a lot about is sort of, we've been living in a wounded masculine paradigm for centuries now, and we're living at like the very tip of the restructuring of our society. It's such an exciting time to be alive.
Agreed.
But with that, there's, with what great power comes great responsibility. And so we're really being asked to look at like, what are some of these things within ourselves that we really need to come into right relationship with? Mm-hmm. And in that, I think we come into right relationship with the world around us in a really profound way.
I couldn't agree more. And that's one of the many reasons why I absolutely fell in love with your book. Thank you. Sovereign Love, so your book came out last year, right? 2020?
May of this year, actually.
May of this year.
Yeah.
Was it May of this year? I'm like, wait, what year are we in?
I know. I feel like it's been like 5 years in a year.
We're not 2025 yet. Okay. Okay. So your book, I feel like your book, first of all, I think it is absolutely so important. My work is all self-mastery, how to live a self-directed life.
Beautiful.
And I always say, like, there's so many selves, all capital SELF, in my world: self-love, self-awareness, self-trust. I believe that everything always returns to self, right? And so when you say that, it really strikes a chord with me. And I truly believe that, the relationship that you have with yourself is the most important relationship. I always say, like, you're in you until you're out of here. So it's probably a good idea to get into a really harmonized, whole relationship with yourself.
Yes.
And I believe that Sovereign Love, your book, and your wisdom, your frameworks, just your whole perspective and approach to reclaiming the masculine and the feminine energy, and really bringing people back into a state of wholeness is exactly what is needed, necessary, and I believe people are waking up to this. So your book has really powerful legs. Like, I believe, I have full body chills right now, truth chills, honestly, because I know in my own work, women especially, holy shit, they're just like, oh, I'm tired. I'm like, yeah, you should be, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Because there's just that disharmony, and not just women, there's men to talk about. And I love how you talk about men too.
Thank you.
But I believe that there's sort of an awakening happening. So your book is, to me, it's like, it's a fucking blueprint that's really going to support so many. That's why I really wanted to start with that, because it doesn't matter if one is in a relationship or partnership or not listening to this or watching this episode. First and foremost, it's all about themselves.
Yeah, thank you. I received that. And it's interesting. People will ask me sometimes, like, what kind of research did you do to write the book? And I'm like, I didn't do any research. It was a lot of what I was feeling within my own experience, what I was seeing with the couples that I work with, but also just downloads that I was getting from something larger than me saying, this is the collective shift that's happening. And it was really about integrating and trusting, the wisdom from somewhere else. Like, so it feels like it came through me, but it's about us more than it's about our relationships or anything. It's just about like what we are awakening to, as you so beautifully said.
You, again, so much resonance because I don't come from academia, but I can sit down and talk with, and I do, neuroscientists, psychologists. I love, if I was to go back and take the academia route, I know exactly where I belong, just from a soul level. It's like I live in this space innately. And that's the thing about you, is that all of your work, I can sense and feel like this is not to disregard science and the profession and your background and, just your business, like how, everything that, but you can tell when somebody embodies what they're sharing versus like if it's just up here versus is it here and here? Is that synthesis happening?
Yes.
And you are that synthesis. And I actually really love that about you, is that to me, you are that dance between science and spirituality. And I don't think that's an easy dance, especially for somebody who does have a background of academia, because I feel like there's a lot of oftentimes, right? There's a bit of a fight there.
Yeah.
And yet I think it's the most beautiful and empowering experience when we can merge these two, because I don't think that they're separate. I'd love for you to talk about that.
Yeah, I love everything you're saying already. And what's interesting, and I know that you will resonate with this, what you're speaking to, again, I receive it and I feel grateful to hear it. And it's this thing that's accessible to all of us when we start trusting ourselves and sort of like get out of like what I should be or what I should be saying or how I should be delivering whatever work I'm doing or message in the world. And, you and I met in a yoga studio like so many years ago. And it's so funny because I was a yoga teacher for years that never said the word God in a class, as much as like, I would feel spiritual experiences on the mat for myself. And I just was so really hypervigilant about not offending anyone and making sure that it felt inclusive for everyone. And so when I started to talk about my own spiritual experience in life and in groups that I was leading, it almost felt like coming out to me because it was something that I'd been experiencing within myself for so long, but I didn't talk about my spiritual practices and all of those things sort of, in a more sharing with other people way. And so I guess I'm saying all of that to say the more that I did, the more that I started to trust my voice and feel like, no, this is like my way of being of service in this lifetime, right? And I think that's for all of us to sort of like come back to our essence and trust in that.
Yeah, no, self-trust is a huge part of the conversation with me. It's literally everything. I mean, the person who doesn't really trust their authentic self, their true essence. And I don't think that's an easy thing to do. And I always frame it as that. I'm not saying what I'm saying is easy. Like, it's not easy, but it is the assignment.
That's right.
Ultimately, because to live a life where you don't trust yourself, you actually never fully get to know yourself, your truest self. You're always playing smaller.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
What has that journey been like for you? Just moving into it. I know that's what you're like. I know.
Yeah. I think so much of it is, I talk a lot about this battle that all of us have between these dualities. And a lot of times we think about them in terms of attachment versus authenticity, which is a little bit of what I hear in what you're speaking to. And in the book, I talk about it in the context of like the masculine, which is like the framework, the structure, the like, this is the belonging. Well, I won't even say belonging. I'm going to like strike that as I say it, the fitting in, right?
Yes.
The fitting into the container of who I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
But then there's this battle between the authenticity and the expansion and the aliveness. And to me, that's the feminine aspects of who we are. But in the beginning of our lives, we're really we're aware that we need the attachments. We're aware that we need to fit in for survival, right? So it's sort of, we have a family of origin or the community around us, and we're sort of assessing for safety. And there's a lot of things that we learn about who we need to be safe in the world. And a lot of times that is the fitting in, that is making my essence, my feminine aspects of self smaller so that I will be accepted and I won't be in that space of what we all fear to some extent, which is exile from the larger community, right? But then it's that thing of, I think Anais Nin has this quote that's like, and then,
right? She's my everything.
You get it. But then it's like the day came where the pain of being in a bud became so large that I had to, I don't know, I'm butchering the quote, but whatever.
Yeah,
right?
where she couldn't stay contained anymore.
Yeah, and I think that happens for all of us. I think there's a point where the pain of keeping ourselves small, not stepping into our life's potential, or really doing the work that we know that we need to do to heal, just becomes unbearable. And so we start to reclaim some of those aspects of self that we, put down in what I love to call the basement of our psyche. And so we go back for those aspects of ourself, and it's such a beautiful space of reunion. But to your point before, it's really, really scary because what is in the shadows, like those dark aspects of self, which is the feminine, which is the unknown. We don't know what's unknown. So it can feel really destabilizing and scary to go there,
Yeah, totally. So you say that, and I'm just thinking about my whole life. I'm my 20s, the years of shadow work. Just 20s are so,
Yeah.
I think what would be really fun and helpful, because it's going to be a big part of the conversation, is to lay out the terms. What do we mean by masculine energy, feminine energy, wounded? In my terminology, I call the opposite of wounded is whole, healthy and whole, however you like to frame it. And I thought what could be fun, and this is totally the writer in me, is to create characters.
Beautiful.
Wait, so we can start with Johnny, because Johnny's my love from Dirty Dancing, and maybe
I mean, it is so funny. So I come from a background in depth psychology, and we talk a lot about archetypes, and I love the archetype of a Johnny because there's so much about, even as you say, that character, right? He's such a beautiful integration in a lot of ways of his masculine and feminine, right? He's very strong, stoic, kind of that if you mess with Johnny, it's a wrap, right? Yeah. But at the same time, when he dances, he's just so in his intuition and in his body and soul. Yes. And it's something that's a larger part of him that's moving through him. So I digress back to what you're saying when you said Johnny. And I was like, whoa, that archetype.
That's his effect.
Right?
So would you say that Johnny, can we frame Johnny, even if we're kind of shifting this for our own needs for the show? Let's say that Johnny is, the whole masculine, the healthy, however you want to frame, and has that harmonization of whole, healthy, feminine energy. How does he move in the day? What does he look like? Because the reason why I want to say, let me just insert this. And this is another reason why I love you, truly. There's a lot out there on masculine, feminine energy. I mean, we have a lot of, and I mean this in no judgment, disrespect, it's observation. That's what I do. I serve people. You have the people literally making their whole career out of I'm a feminine coach. And then you have the terms toxic masculinity and stuff like that. And it's just, there's just so much out there. And I say this so deeply on record with conviction that to me, you are a source for anyone who wants to really learn about this shit and learn about it, to understand it, but also to be able to integrate it strongly into their life. And I feel like you are the source. So that's why I feel like it'll be helpful and also fun to just sort of create these archetypes and really define them so that as we move through the conversation, people really get it,
Yeah. Well, so humbled by that. And thank you.
Yeah.
What I think the lens that I started to see these ways of being and how we're showing up in relationships and how we understand these energetics is really understanding what energy is. And I think that there's a way that, well, I'll back up a little bit and say, and then I'm going to come back to Johnny, but there's a way that I was sitting with couples and I just had, you like have a moment of like such clarity around something and you can see what's happening and you don't know why, but I would be watching the way that couples were interacting and I was like, oh, they're competing for energy. They're feeling like if I can just get this person to like give me something energetically, then I'll feel more whole.
Yeah.
And it won't work because it's sort of out of alignment with like the larger truth of who they are. So like our soul won't allow for that. And so the work is for us to really come into the space of personal responsibility and understand energy, right?
Totally.
And so I started to like get obsessed with like energy and how these energetics work. And when I was in grad school, we sort of talked about masculine and feminine in terms of the anima and animus, which was the way that Carl Jung described them. And, Jung described them with a lot less nuance and just ways of sort of shifting and being alive in our energetics. He sort of described them as like the unconscious aspects of a man is his anima and the unconscious aspects of a woman is her animus. And that's just sort of an oversimplification to me, although very grateful for Carl.
Totally.
Scratching the surface of this. Thank you, Dr. Jung. And I think that there is a way that when we understand that these energies are alive in all of us, it becomes like such a power source for us to understand, like, no, I am always able to be in relationship with what's happening with me energetically and reclaim my energy. And to the point you were making a moment ago, I think what's missing or what was missing a lot of times in some of the polarity teaching that I saw, in the cultural zeitgeist is that it's just still a real outsourcing of our power, right? So it becomes like, when I have a man who's in his strong masculine, I can soften into my feminine. And it becomes a little bit of like, well, I need something outside of me, again, that competing for energy in order for me to believe that I'm whole. But I don't actually think that's the work of our lifetime. I think our work is to really come into remembrance of our wholeness and how do I make that my practice to come back to wholeness again and again forever, amen. But in order to do that, I just come into relationship with like, where am I energetically and what's historic here? Can I do some shadow work? All of those elements, but it's really understanding that that's something that's accessible to me regardless of how the other person shows up.
Right. And I mean, I think the premise of the book too is like when that happens, when you can actually reclaim those energies. And, I always say like harmonize, and I'm very specific, intentional about all words, but harmony over balance. Harmony is a symphony, sort of like taking chaos and like making a symphony of it, right? Versus balance is static, and that's not life, right? So, and I know this to be true for my own life. I'm very introspective. I've been writing my whole life. That has put me in deep, honest conversations with myself that has done everything for me, because it's really helped to build the self-awareness, the relationship that I have with myself. And a big part of the coming more into myself, a big piece of it, I should say, was really starting to understand exactly what you're saying is, without even studying it, the energetics, and I have 3 younger brothers. They're like my baby brothers, but we grew up right next to each other. So kind of like a brother, but also their older sister. And then I have an older sister. And so and I won't forget we're going to go right back there. So there's always been for me this, like, my masculine and my feminine energies have actually been very palpable to me. Before my career, I was a celebrity makeup artist, before like coming into my soul work, my dharma now, right? And that's, there's a lot of masculinity actually in that, like the hustle and the grind, but I mean, it's like very feminine in a lot of ways. And those are very surface kind of level. But my point is to say that I was able to learn more about myself the more I started to learn about the energetics that were happening, that I'm functioning with, and where I might be overcompensating, or maybe there's like a, so just had to insert that to really ultimately through personal journey, validate what you're saying right now.
I love that. And I think what's so fascinating to me about all of us is, and I'm sure you've had this experience, like when there's truth, it just resonates and there's like a knowing, and we don't know why we understand, but it's like some part of me has always known this, but I remember, right? And there's a way that when I started to drop into the understanding of these energetics, I was like, it's like, of course.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know why I understand, like it just was like, and I think that's a little bit when we're connecting to the higher version of who we are, that it's just like, oh yeah, of course I know that.
Right. Well, I mean, you can look to nature, the natural world.
Yes.
Our greatest, like it and we are one with it, right? There's no separation. It's just somehow, some way, we decided that it was a separation, but it's like, no, actually there's not. So if you really just kind of expand, this is why I said before we started, my consciousness recognizes your consciousness. Like that's, you know what I mean? It's
yes,
like,
I do.
We can drop it. I know you do. And I think the more that your consciousness expands, the more that you're able to really recognize what I just said, which is like, it's all around us. And if we just pay attention, we can start to ultimately understand more of ourselves, right? In this, throughout the journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So the masculine, so let's have fun with this. So masculine, let's talk about the wounded. Let's talk about, what's your term for just healthy?
Yeah. I think I normally say wounded and healthy. In the book, sometimes I'll describe them as like distorted energetics, right?
Yeah.
Because there's ways that it's like anything else, too much of something, like an amount of stoicism in masculine energy isn't necessarily a bad thing. The way that our society has sort of perpetuated stoicism, and that is what men have to be a man, becomes a distortion of that stoicism or that masculine energy, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit, I'll talk about these energetics from the wounded place versus the healthy place. And to me, it's the fear space versus the love space, right? So when I'm in that space of what I'm defending against, then I'm sort of operating from the space of my wounds, because babies don't come here afraid of anything, right? They're just like, oh, well, maybe not being swaddled and held, but they're just like open and taking in the world, where all of our conditioning teaches us to be afraid, right?
Right. Yeah, sometimes I use the word fragmented because it feels that way, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a fragmentation. And then, and feminine. So if we were to describe, I'll say that when I think of masculine energy, healthy masculine energy, I'm thinking drive, I'm thinking assertive, I'm thinking logic, I'm thinking edge.
Yes.
When I think of healthy, whole feminine women, I'm thinking open, I'm thinking intuitive, I'm thinking nurturing, I'm thinking creative, right?
Beautiful. Yeah, I think in simple terms, a lot of times it's like the masculine is the ego, the feminine is the soul. There's a way that masculine is the action, the feminine is the being, right?
Yes.
But so many of those words that you described are just such beautiful descriptors. And it's like, if we think about what the societal template has been, it's really been from a wounded masculine paradigm, which is sort of, the John Wayne, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, competitive, afraid of failure, just like feeling like you need to prove something. A lot of times I'll say wounded masculine energy within all of us is the energetic that feels like we're not enough, right? And then we need to be hustling for our enough for a lifetime.
Yeah.
And then the wounded or distorted feminine energy, which is so much of what all of us are conditioned to think of as like the feminine energy that we reject in ourselves, is the more anxious energy. It's the energy of like people pleasing, neediness, clinging, feeling like I need something outside of me to be whole.
Yeah.
And that's the energy of like who I am at my core. Excuse me, my essence is too much.
Yeah.
So it's sort of, again, those dualities of not enough and too much. But it's fascinating the extent to which all of these variables are things that all of us grapple with throughout our lives. And the work of coming back into that healthy space, our space of wholeness is, if I'm in that wounded feminine space, if I'm too much it's containing myself and really affirming for myself and seeing myself like, you're never too much. You couldn't possibly be if you tried. You're exactly who you came into this life to be, right? And that's, I become my own sacred father, energetic. I was going to say actually, but it's like that energy of like what we needed from the perfect father energetic, right?
Right.
We become that for ourselves. We contain ourselves.
Right.
We become safety for ourselves, right? And then if we're shifting from our wounded masculine energetic to embodying more of our healthy feminine energy, that is the space of I get to just be free and play and trust and source and live my life without feeling like there's a right way to do it. And that, of course, you're enough. Like being enough is your birthright. Like there's nothing you need to do in this lifetime. You just get to be. And then if you think about that as like the perfect mother, just like seeing you in your essence and that nurturing energy of like, oh, my love, you're perfect, right? Like that's sort of the energetic that heals that wounded masculine.
Yeah, you talk about that in your book. So you talk about it. But the reparenting, and that's such a huge, I really understand that deeply from my own journey too, you know? But I mean, all of us, like we all come from, I mean, for the most part, I don't want to speak in absolutes, but I think most of us.
We all do.
You're the expert.
I've yet to meet the unicorn that doesn't, but I'm sure they're out there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such an important piece to, for me, the ultimate state is wholeness. And that's really something that, you know, I can truly say with conviction, I have truly honed that in for myself.
Beautiful.
The writing again has helped because again, when you're constantly facing yourself on page and it, you know, full honesty to the best of your ability, it does something. I mean, ultimately it creates safety, right? I can really be who the fuck I am. And I'm not judging myself. I'm just expressing myself kind of thing, you know? And then there's so many more, you know, players to the game that have brought the wholeness into the picture. But I believe that the reparenting piece is a huge player to that as well, to getting into a true state of wholeness. And something that I was just thinking about, that a curious question, do you think that so let me think about the best way to frame this. Okay. Do you think an individual in a relationship, in a partnership with somebody, will have a easier or maybe more challenging time to reclaim their energies and get into the state of wholeness versus an individual who is not in partnership?
Well,
That you laughed.
yeah, you know, it's,
And I'm sure it's not a black and white, you know, like I know that it's nuanced, but I'm just curious to, how you take to that.
It's a yes and, right? I think that, first of all, nothing evokes our pain points like romantic love and, you know, the desire that all of us have to feel that magical space of discovery and all the eros and life force and beautiful things that romantic love is, right? And so I'll say a lot of times, it's super easy to be enlightened sitting on the couch by myself. But then, like, we get out there and we like meet someone who brings up a lot of feels. And it's like, who am I? I don't even recognize myself. And it's beautiful. It's by design, right? But I think our work in terms of what we were talking about in terms of reparenting, and to me, where we're really shifting the paradigm of what we believe is the purpose of romantic love and relationships, and actually not even just romantic love, like love of anyone and community, all the things, right? But is really that this person is showing me like, oof, there's some stuff that comes up within me.
Right.
What's the story I'm telling myself about this? Can I be in that inner inquiry and take a lot of responsibility for it's all perfect. It's what I need to understand in this moment versus what we had previously held is sort of like, I just need to communicate my needs a little bit more effectively. I just need to bring this person to a place where they'll make me more comfortable.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's the purpose. And I think a lot of times we're missing out on an opportunity, but also it's sort of like where we get into conflict, that's circular conflict that never ends.
Right. Totally.
Yeah. So I think it's the beautiful curriculum that is the most challenging. And I think that's kind of by design.
And it's probably, I think, just being 46, and again, just thinking about my journey, I think that the stages of your life have a lot to do with it too. Like, because again, it's like a conscious, right?
Well said.
You want to talk about that? I want to surface the enchantress.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
When I heard you talk about that, first of all, that is so badass because we have, what do we have? The maiden, the mother, and the crone, right? And I've always felt like, that doesn't, we're missing something here.
Totally. And
you nailed it.
Well, I don't even know where it came from. Like, I don't even know who I heard talk. Like, I don't know. But then I started to do research and I'm like, oh, this is a thing. But to your point, I would be like, I really don't feel like I'm in the crone phase of life, first of all.
I don't either.
And second of all, like, I know you feel this because you radiate it, but I came out of this mother stage a little bit and it's, you know, for those who are like, what are you guys talking about? It's sort of around like, begins around 38, I would say, for women. And there's like another, and I don't know the astrology around this, but there's like another phase of like how, you know, in 28, you come to your Saturn return.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I don't know if it's called that, but it's something. But it's like all of a sudden, everything starts shifting and we start to like, I don't give a, you know, like phase of life. And all of the societal conditioning, all of the ways that we've been told, like, this is who you have to be a good girl or a good woman. We're just like, enough with this. And it's beautiful. Like, well, it's fascinating how many people come in crisis in their marriages and, you know, relationships end and all kinds of things get evoked and stirred up. But what's happening, I've since come to understand, is we are really remembering our witch. And what the enchantress is like the witch phase of life, right? And so for me, as I started coming into my early 40s, I was like, God, this is fascinating. I feel like I was so conditioned to like be afraid of aging and coming into my 40s. And I feel like a fine wine. I feel like I'm the best I've ever been. Like, why do I feel so powerful all of a sudden? This is fascinating.
It's so true.
Right? And I was like, I don't know. Like, ask me my age. I'd love to tell you my age. I feel like this is amazing. And I think, you know, we can go one of two ways. We can be in the like deep embracing of that, or we can really sort of be stuck in the space of the grief around we're not that maiden anymore. And we can really sort of like be attempting to recapture youth versus like really digging into the wisdom of like what we've gathered throughout our lives up to this point.
Juicy at that point.
Oh my God.
Right?
Yeah. But there's also a reason that society teaches us to fear aging. And it's exactly what you were saying. We become so wise and so clear and focused and intuitive. And we are remembering our gifts. And a patriarchal structure has really needed us to be afraid of that, right? And feel a lot of shame around that. And when we're feeling all these things, it's like, no, you're just crazy. It's your hormones. And it's like, no, this is me remembering my power.
Yes.
And we really need to fear that as, you know, a society that doesn't want women to remember how powerful they are.
Yeah. God, that's so good. I'm like, let me just sit in that for a second. Well, there's two things that kind of come in. So two things that I talk about often. First, self-intimacy. Yeah, and I'm like, that whole time, I want you to please rip that because here's what's so exciting for me with you is, you know, I do a lot of solo episodes and these are things I write about and I speak about, but I know I'm sitting with someone, again, full body chills, who can just fucking go there and with your own wisdom and your own experience, like give new life to it, even like expand on it. And so that's so exciting for me. So self-intimacy, and then it really just this connects, and it all lives in the enchantress conversation that we're having right now is it's not just sensuality, it's self-sensuality. Yes. Sensuality is, I'm an artist. And so it's not just what we've been taught to, you know, sensuality, it's just sex. It's like, well, no, it's a lens. It's, please. Yeah. Okay, go. I'm crossing both legs.
Yeah. I'm like, she gets it. Yeah, you so do. And it's fascinating. Like that is a part of the reclaiming of our power center to me. There's a way that I'm just seeing, first of all, conversations around celibacy that, have just like never happened in our lifetime. I feel like that to me is really exciting, because what I started to notice is there's an incredible power that comes from reclaiming our sexual energy and really being in the space of like, my sex belongs to me, and not in any way with any sort of like contempt or malice for anyone.
No.
It's just in the space of rediscovering my magic and a love affair with myself and being in this skin. And in that space, there's so much creative energy that is cultivated, right? Like all that second chakra that we just like start to channel into something that we feel really moved to do in this lifetime. And I think there's just a way that was another part of the programming that I started to realize, and I've become a little bit obsessed lately with that there's so much untapped resource and power that we as women have when we really reframe this idea of like exactly what you were saying, like sensuality with and for myself. Yes. There's so much just, I don't know, like
liberation.
Yes. Like I don't even have the words to describe what comes from it, but it's so beautiful. And it's, to me, it's like what's going to change the world. Like I just have like, this is where this all shifts, because the way that we have been conditioned to believe that we are like objects for consumption versus these beautiful eternal beings that are just like the oracles. Yes. Yeah. Yes. And when we remember ourselves and we hold ourselves with that level of reverence, then all of a sudden it's, we have a society of high priestesses walking and remembering what we came for and what can we do with that energy.
I mean, and you know what I love so much is that you say reverence. This is not, I'm not guarded. I'm not, it's not, I'm higher than. It's not pushing the masculine away. And because we're there now. It was so, again, I really focus on words because words cast spells. Words are energy, right? And so that was
I love it.
I know. I'm like, so it's and I know my audience is like just soaking you up right now because they're already used to like that. This is no, but it's so important, and I love it for so many reasons. Some of what I already just shared, but again, I feel like I see something also happening with that's not so great in the feminine. You already know where I'm going. That space when we talk about feminine energy. And so I'm writing a book right now, and there's a part of masculine, feminine energy. And at the end, I make it a point to say to come into more of the healthy and whole feminine is to not disregard the masculine.
That's right.
It doesn't work that way.
That's right.
Please run with that and unpack everything that comes with that. The toxic masculinity piece too, if you want to dive into that, because I really don't.
Love that phrase either. Yeah. I think there's a way that what I started to understand is so much of what we have been taught about feminism and what it is to be a good feminist. And, we are also unbelievably grateful for all of the gifts of the modern feminist movement. And I think there's so many ways that we were all conditioned to really reject our feminine energy by mothers who are really attempting to keep us safe. God bless them, right? And I think what so many of us as women have been embodying for a very long time, because we had to in a lot of ways to keep ourselves safe, but has just been like a really wounded masculine armor. And there's so often the way that we are meeting men and masculinity and just relationship dynamics with so much of that armored up energy and a lot of contempt and really that wounded masculine framework of what it is to relate to one another. Yeah. And I can't tell you how often, I'll say this first and own it for myself. I very much lived there for so many years of my life and my marriage. And there were ways that, and I talk about this in the book, until I had a little boy, I really was just so guarded. My heart was sort of armored up, right? Yeah. And there were so many ways that just seeing him and seeing how we come into the world as babies and these little boys, oh my God, I'm going to cry. His heart was so big, and he was just so, he would be little when he started going to preschool, and he would like hold hands with the other little boys and hug, and they would give each other kisses and let's cross the street and hold hands. And I'd be like, oh my God, how do we like protect this energy?
Totally.
How do I not let this world anywhere near this beautiful soul?
I know. I have my little nephews and my niece. I'm feeling that deeply right now. Yes.
Yeah. And
so pure.
I just felt like, oh God, I would never want him to be with a woman like me if he ends up being attracted to women. But I would never want that. You know, I would never want someone who was not protective of his heart and his soul in the way that I know I haven't been with men in my life in the past.
Yeah.
Oftentimes because it's who I was conditioned I had to be to keep myself safe. And I think there's a lot of ways that we're just so conditioned as women to reject our feminine and our ability to stay in our hearts, to be vulnerable, to trust in life enough that no part of me is ever diminished by being soft and being connected to my soul. And so what I really believe we are evolving into as a human species is that we're going to take a step back a little bit from this thing of pair bonds because we're somehow incomplete unless we're partnered. And that we're going to enter into union with another person when it's justified because our soul's missions are so aligned and it's so juicy and there's so much fire because of who we are in our essence, but not because we're incomplete. And that's a very different relationship to what it is to relate. And to me, I don't know if you've experienced this, but the more that I fall in love with men and the masculine collective without agenda, the more the universe shows me so many beautiful, integrated, supportive, loving men. And I feel like I'm like in love with, I'm in love with all the men.
You know, and I think because again, I have 3 brothers who are my family is they're my everything. I love them. My sister too. But we're a wolf pack, right? And so it's an interesting dynamic. Again, I'm 46 and you have 45, 44, and then 42. And so, close. Yeah. And then my sister's 6 years older. So she was like the mom, growing up. But that dynamic where it's like, I'm the older sister, and I for sure had to have been some kind of samurai in a past life because there's just that switch in me that just like it's so there naturally, and especially when it comes to my family. So growing up, I was always like just ready, but always soft at the same time. There was always that. So that was not actually what I wanted to point out. What I wanted to point out is that the reverence that I have for men is really intact because first and foremost, because I have 3 kick-ass fucking brothers and they are badass and I love them. And it's not perfect. Like they have their things like we all do, but God, their hearts, they're just so real. And in addition to that, I have best friends. I mean, one of my greatest, he's a soulmate. He's a best friend. He's my favorite thought partner. And he's someone, we have the talks all the time. We talk about everything. But it's just, so my experience, and I'm a girl's girl. I am a woman's, that's my whole, I call women in so I really resonate with you again, because I love the piece, the justified relationship. Is that right? I'm leaning in. I really do believe that this is everything to me comes down to consciousness. When you can really understand that part, your consciousness it's gone somewhere else. It's expanded because I don't think that's easy for people. And partly because probably we have been groomed to see it as you complete me.
Yep.
Right. But you've created, now there's we have ways to understand this better because of what you've put out. And I think it's so important because I know in my own life, I'm like, there's no trying to fit in a square peg in a round hole. There's certainly no settling. And you just know when alignment is there because you can really feel it. But I think to really feel that, you have to feel it within you first.
That part. Yeah. It's so funny, and it's interesting, Roxanne, because I feel like Some of this is what you were saying earlier. It could conceivably be the way that we start to differentiate and come into a more individuated self as we get older. But I think collectively, some of this is that we are awakening. And it's fascinating. Like, I have so many thoughts about what you just said. I'm like, where to go first? But I believe that there are ways that we are sort of shifting timelines, and I feel like you're probably, that's probably not the first time you've spoken to your audience about that a little bit. So they will understand what I mean. But like, the timeline is that we're literally existing in a different timeline around timelines that might not have the same experience of truth and where we are with things. And it's like you said, without hierarchy or like anyone is sort of wrong. It's just, I completely see it different than I used to, right? Yep. And that's sort of what I believe as we shift timelines, we're starting to understand. I'm like choosing my words like carefully on this one, but it's that these codependent paradigms aren't even in our awareness as much anymore. Like the idea that it is another person's responsibility to complete me is so out of alignment with what I know my soul came here to do, right? Yeah. And so in an attempt to love another person, it becomes, I am so in reverence of your soul's journey. And to me today, love is just the expression that your soul is safe with me. And all of the ways that I love you are in demonstration of that, right? And that I understand that whether we're together or not, there are things that you came into this life to do, and we will collide to learn lessons, but we will collide sometimes to join in our shared mission. But what we're allowing to die, I believe, in the timeline that we've entered, many of us, is this idea that the purpose of love is in any way to make me whole. It's like, water or the ocean believing it needs water to be like, you're whole. Like, you don't need that. That's silly season. Like, why would you need that? You are that. You are source. You are the embodiment of that. So how could you ever possibly need something beyond the source that you are? You are love. Why would you need love if that's what you are?
So good. I know people just like take that in for a moment, because again, I mean, there's a depth. It's interesting. It's simple, and simple isn't easy, but simple is also where there's so much depth. Oftentimes I find, and I think, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking of several things. One of which I'm like consciousness, timeline, emotional intelligence. I think maybe a lot of the dynamics that we, like from way back then, caveman time, it made sense, right? Like these, right? Because that's how we survived.
It's necessary. Yeah.
I think as we, again, consciousness expands, but even if we want to simplify the word and bring it back, emotional intelligence, like that's a big player here too. Like individuals that when you start, right? When you start kind of leveling up in that specific realm, like self-awareness is one of my favorite subjects. I think I'd love to hear you talk about it. It's funny. I have this thing where I'm like, you can't, it's not Instagrammable. You can't fucking hang it on your wall. You can't sleep with it in bed. You can't wear it you can't drive it. And yet it affects the entirety of your life.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, I draw so much inspiration from the Stoic philosophers, and there's a way that when we think about like Socrates saying like, know thyself, like that is the work of this lifetime. That is what we came here for. Right. Yeah. And if I believe that everything is for my soul's expansion and for me to understand in the curriculum of this life that, I came here to learn, if I think that's the purpose, then all of our relationship dynamics are a part of that. And what's so fascinating to me is when you start to see life through that lens of like, all of this is happening for me to learn from, to become who I have the potential to become. Nothing is ever out of alignment with that. Nothing is ever anything other than it should, quote, be. It's all perfect. But legitimately that. And, we don't know the entire trajectory of our experience until we do. It's that thing of like, life can only be understood backwards. I think that's Søren Kierkegaard. I want to give shout outs, but it's true, right?
Yeah.
Like that we can only understand when we come to the other side of whatever we have moved through. And it's like, oh God,
so true.
Thank you, angels, for protecting me from what I thought I wanted, or the thing that I thought wasn't working out was like the most divinely orchestrated gift ever. And when we see life that way, it literally becomes like a love affair with life. And you're just like, look at all the magic. It's everywhere. I can't not see it. And then our relationships, that gets to be that. It's like, who has this, or why has this person come into my life? What are they going to teach me, right?
Totally.
And it's just...
You go into it with a whole different perspective and just energetically, like there's more curiosity, right? Curiosity. So
and curiosity is like...
It's everything. My quote is, curiosity is the way out.
Oh.
It's the fucking way out.
I love that.
It's like curiosity, kill the cat. They're the same, like crossed out, kill the cat. I'm like, curiosity is the way out. It's the way out every time.
And in our relationships, it's the way like back. It's the way in. It's the way, right?
It's the way.
Curiosity
totally.
It's all of it. It really is. And it's just like if we can switch out our fear with curiosity a lot of times, because sometimes the love feels like a stretch. It feels like the remembrance that I can't quite get there. But if I can be curious around like, what am I not seeing here? What are my blind spots, right? What is the story I'm telling myself? What feels historic about this? What reminds me of something from the past?
Yeah.
If I can be in that inquiry, all of a sudden I can soften a little bit and I don't have to be so hard in those edges. And that is us coming back to our divine self, right?
I'm hearing the women right now. I'm hearing the women right now.
I love you, sisters.
Yeah. How do I get more into my feminine, right? Because this is such a thing right now, and I say that with compassion and I understand. Mm-hmm. How do we guide them? What are some practices like? Let's do it this way. Let's start with the woman who doesn't even realize that she needs it yet. What are some of the things that show up, in her life, her experiences?
I felt that in my body as you said that, because I think there's so much collective grief that comes up for us as women around what I love to speak to is like the little girl we left behind. And I say in the book, like, we have to go back for her. We have to go back and say, oh, my love, I'm sorry I left you.
Yeah.
You were so perfect exactly as you were and are. And, I think following the breadcrumbs of our bliss and just attempting to rediscover, like, who was I before the world told me who I needed to be? What did I love? What did she love to do? What did she love to explore? Yeah. I think, when I'm most in my feminine, I am in that childlike space of wonder, and like life gets to be fun. Yeah, I'm having fun, right?
Yeah,
like that's how I know I'm in my feminine. I'm like having a lot of fun, right? And there's so much about that we're just really conditioned to feel like is silly and naive and like unnecessary and all of these things. It's the most necessary. And it feels like breathing. It feels so easy, but it's just like giving ourselves permission.
Totally. One of these, I wrote this too, but I put this out a while ago. Like, one of the ways to support women to evoke more of your feminine energy, to come into it more, flirt with yourself.
I love that. Yeah.
And it's like, wait, what? And oh my gosh, it was a hit. And we're like, this feels like something that feels right, but fuck, how do I even do that?
I love that.
You know what I mean? And it's like,
I love that.
How would you guide them?
Yeah, because I think of, when I think of like divine feminine energy, right? Like what that is, to be in that energetic, it's a woman who is just so falling in love with life and herself and this love affair of like sampling all the Raja and like just moving through this world. Really, there's something about that phrase, like flirting, yes, with myself, but with life.
That's the thing.
Right?
That's it.
Yeah.
That's the part. That's the sensuality piece
Yes.
too.
Yeah.
That's what I'm so happy that you say that. And I say that because the women that I know listening to this, like, can feel that that's the part you have to let go. And it's this interplay with life where you're just like, oh, you're dancing, you're feeling like it's light, it's free, it's curious, it's creative.
It's fun.
It's fun.
I think there's something in just understanding you can't get it wrong. Like, can't get it wrong. You're never going to be done with the exploration of who you are. But I think little things like, what does sensuality feel like for me? What are like really pretty, like I bought myself this ridiculously expensive underwear when I was in Mexico, and I was like, for me, like,
I have a problem with that.
want
I do
this
that all the
for
time.
me. Yes. I want to like traipse around in this beautiful underwear for me, right?
Yes.
And just loving the way it feels to be in love with myself.
Totally.
Is such like the potent reclamation.
Right. It's the ultimate opener, because when you can really, I talk to myself all the time. I mean, I'm in a relationship with myself. Like, there is a bond here.
Most sacred relationship of this lifetime.
Truly.
Yeah.
And so when you get to that place where it's just comfortable to, like when something that I talk about very often, because I think it's so important and it's so almost underrated, is self-compassion. That is self-compassion. So how I frame it, I actually try and put a little edge to it. Not that it needs it, but it is a very edgy thing because it's not easy. It's like a high performance tool, because self-compassion allows you to be a human. It allows you to have the messy moments and not become them, right? You can experience them, learn from them, hold yourself, move through them. That self-compassion is like, I'm not here to be perfect. I don't even know what the fuck that is. I'm just here to experience, to learn, to grow, to expand.
Yeah.
Right? And so I'd love for you to talk about self-compassion, because I think that's such an important
Yeah. I talk about the tools in our toolkit a lot. And I think, to me, radical self-compassion is the one game-changing tool of my lifetime. Every aspect of my life changed when I decided I get to be a work in progress. I get to be imperfect. I get to love myself through it. And I forgive me over and over again, forever and ever, amen. I often say, like, I forgive myself for the woman I was 5 minutes ago, who was a totally different person, and she's forgiven, right? Like, it's perfect. And I don't believe in mistakes, and that's often a big statement. I don't. I think every messy aspect of my path up to this point, like, I needed it. I needed that to become the woman I've become. And so God bless her younger self, like, she was perfect. She was exactly like working it out, right? And I think that that's the thing. Like, if we understand, again, we didn't come here to be perfect. We came here to learn and to be and to explore and expand. Then of course we get to be compassionate with ourselves. It's like, I think a lot of times I think of it like, if you think of a toddler that's like learning to do all of these things in the world, right? And you will say to a toddler, like, don't touch that stove because it's hot, right? But they've never experienced hot. So sometimes they have to get burned to know hot. And then it's like, I understand hot now, but you wouldn't like yell at that toddler for not knowing what they don't know. You'd be like, you're learning. It's okay. And that's hot, right? But we don't really do that with ourselves a lot of times, right?
There's a larger tendency to be an asshole to yourself.
Yeah.
And that's why I think self-compassion is actually more badass than people see it, because it's easier to be an asshole to yourself than it is to just hold space and hold that compassion for yourself as you're being a human, going through the human experience, and like, you know what I mean? But when you actually can pull on that self-compassion and like actually really like have that be normal for you to live with this attribute, I really think it's actually like a superpower. It changes everything. And I love that you point out that you can't get it wrong. I have a quote, you can't make a wrong move when you make a true move. And those are the only moves that come from the heart.
Beautiful.
So it's like when you ground into the heart, I mean,
that's beautiful.
Right? Like this whole right, wrong, good, bad. I mean, I know that can be a bigger conversation, but it's all judgment. And if you're just judging the whole time, how are you fucking learning? You can't.
Absolutely. And I think the thing that keeps us stagnant in life more than anything else is we're just so afraid of getting it wrong. Yeah. But even that is an aspect of a wounded masculine paradigm that's taught us that there's a right way to do life. Like, who is living this right life? Like, I don't know anybody who's like got it all figured out and has never made, like, who is this person, this imaginary person moving through the world that way? It's just not real. No. And I think if we understand that it's actually so much more productive to be in the space of forward momentum than it is beating ourselves up about what's done. It's like, it's done. So let's move forward. But we will get in this stagnant space of, being really hard on ourselves. And I don't really love to live there because it's just not productive.
Right. And I think I'd love to hear your experience, your thoughts on this, but especially professionally. I wonder if I imagine it might come up a lot, but I find that guilt and shame are two of the biggest detriments and roadblocks, and it just stops people from evolving in ways that they're here to evolve and like connect with their higher self. Like, it just stops everything.
Yeah. I think, and to me, there's an important differentiation between guilt and shame, because I think that guilt is something that can be information and actually useful, because we will feel guilty sometimes. Well, sometimes it's not useful. sometimes it is, right? Like, that is the thing that keeps us a lot of times connected to our soul and our humanity. If we could just do all of the things in the world without ever feeling bad about it. Like, even when I say I don't believe in mistakes, but then what do you do when you know that you've missed the mark, or you feel like I've harmed someone unintentionally, or whatever the thing is? Hopefully guilt becomes an indicator of that. Shame is sort of like the experience of that is who I am. So guilt is sort of I did a bad thing. Shame is I am a bad person. And I think it's really important to differentiate between the two, because I did a bad thing does not equate to that's who I am. And I really think we need to keep that at the front of our minds when we're in that space of like, yeah, we are going to fall short. Just because we don't believe in mistakes doesn't mean that I move through the world being exactly who I want to be at all times. Like, that's not human either,
That's such a great differentiation and such an important point. Thank you for sharing that. Sure. Yeah. That, there's so many things deep. I want to ask you, what was your favorite part of writing the book, if there was a favorite part? Is there a part that stood out, or
like my favorite part that's in the book? Is that what you mean?
Let's frame it as because I know as a writer, what unfolded for you in your life? Like, what was there a part of the book that, I don't know, impacted you in some?
You're like, I'm a writer, so I know there was one. Yeah. It's interesting. There's a part in the book where as something started to click for me, and it was a little bit, I was talking about avoidant energy, and you have to read the book to know what I mean. But there's a point where I talk about a woman who was a client of mine who, was having an affair. There was infidelity in her marriage, and she just became sort of obsessed with this person. And the way that she and I started to understand what was being evoked within her, why energy is so different based on the person that we're in relationship with, and how much it is bringing us back into right relationship with ourselves in the most beautifully orchestrated way. And what's so fascinating about these dualities and about how we inevitably create polarity in our relationship dynamics, regardless of who we're relating to, is that it will show us ourselves. And if we're willing to see it that way, it becomes such a source of empowerment. So all of the, there's so much conversation again in the cultural zeitgeist around like avoidant energy and, like, I don't know, like what do people say, like golden retrievers versus black classes, like all this stuff, right? And I'm like, what? It's like, it's fascinating to me. I'm like an old lady, but joking. But there's all these ways that it's sort of like, these are the people to avoid. These are the red flags. Right. And it's like, all of it is information. It's all perfect. But how do I really notice whatever this relationship dynamic is evoking within me and use it as sort of my superpower, as my way to like, oof, this is showing me something I really needed to understand. So I think when I started to like connect the dots on, this is like, if this person hadn't interrupted this pattern for her in the way she relates, she would have drawn him in, and it would have been the same dynamic she had with her husband. But because the universe was like, we're not doing that again, she had to like really be confronted with her own shadow work and doing some of that stuff that she'd been able to brush under the rug because her husband had, just sort of been that go along to get along compliant partner.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, this is fascinating. And it was
That's so rad.
Exciting. Yeah.
That's so cool. Is there anything that now after having written the book, is there something that you would add to the book now?
Oh, I love that. That's interesting. Nobody's asked me that. I love that. I don't think so. Honestly, it feels complete. It feels like where I was at this stage of understanding of all of this. I feel like there's more things that are coming up about our relationships. Some of what we were talking about, like the self-pleasure and like the just all of the things around like how we reclaim our womb space as women. Like I'm sort of in that realm and fascinated. But I think this feels like the beautiful first step or like like the entry point for a lot of those things. And so it feels complete.
Are you in conception right now? Or another?
I mean, I was like, you see my 46-year-old, I'm like, I hope not, girl, damn.
That was so
I love that you read my mind, and I was like, oh my
gosh. With another book.
Perhaps. It's, anything is possible.
Anything is possible.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some ideas percolating that I'm excited to play with a little bit. As as a writer, you just sort of like start like jotting constantly,
Well, I feel like I can answer that question.
Yeah, are you in conception?
Oh God, there's 3 books right now. I started one. I'm on the second one right now. But the reason why is, again, it's not, your book doesn't, to me, it's not coming just from, your experience professionally. I mean, we talked about that, but I can feel the depths of you in your book. And
thank you.
You're a deep thinker. You're a deep liver. You live very deeply, and you ask questions, and you're receptive. You're open, and so you're conduit. So you are receiving, and I feel like there is totally another book coming that I'm already so excited about.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, truly.
What's your sun sign? Are you?
I'm a Gemini, Sagittarius Gemini.
Okay. I feel your Sag a little bit.
Do you feel my Sag?
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Manifesting generator 3-5.
Beautiful.
What about you?
I'm a generator. I'm Capricorn, but I'm sort of Capricornus, but
Capricorn.
A lot of Scorpio energy too. So.
Oh, there you go. I love that.
Yeah.
I love it all. It's all so fun. It's interesting. I thought about this a lot. I've been in Dene's world for days, which is like some of my favorite part about podcasting with guests is just really getting to go deep into your world. This is not where I was going to go, but I have to insert this. This morning I was listening to an episode that was so good with you and Dr. L. God, what was his name?
Oh, Dr. L.
No, it's like there was a doctor. He was saying something. You were on this. I have to just put this in because I was busting up laughing. He goes, you were in the realm of the conversation about like not needing somebody else to complete you. And he was like, I was on my bike and I was thinking, because he was single at the time, he's like, I was thinking, I'm alone and I'm sad. And then he goes, no, I'm not. He was sharing with you a conversation with himself where he realized that that's a fucking lie. Like, no, I'm not. I feel good right now.
I'm like, what's this? I'm fascinated.
Oh my gosh. No, let me pull it up.
I don't remember this.
You guys, you have the best energy. Like your rapport was so fun. Oh, Dr. Scott Lyons.
I gotta tell Scott. Scott is a very good friend of mine.
I felt, oh my gosh, I love this conversation.
That's beautiful. Wait till I tell him, because we fell in love in that podcast conversation, and we've just been really good friends ever since.
I felt that you guys were just fully connected. It was so fun to listen in on your connection, but that part where he's like calling bullshit on us. I just saw the visual of this guy like on his bike saying, "No, I'm not."
And he is like the funniest human ever. I love it. Good. Oh, that's amazing.
Okay, well, I just have a few more. I'd like to just go through, if you're cool with it, a couple of your Instagram. Your Instagram is so badass for anybody who doesn't follow you yet. I know that they will after this conversation.
Thank you.
So I'd love for you to just double click, expand, pull the thread on some of what I'm about to read to you.
Okay.
Why boundaries are an inside job.
Oof. Yeah, that one. I think there's so much about the way that we have been conditioned to think about boundaries that are still that externalization of my power thing. And to me, boundaries are about my relationship with myself. It's really me keeping promises that I make to myself. And so they're about what I'm going to do. And a lot of times we think of boundaries as what are really rules. And I'm giving another person a rule that I want them to follow. And that's my boundary. And how's that working for you? A lot of times it's like that person's not, respecting my boundaries. And I'm like, well, you're the one that needs to respect your boundaries. You're the one that needs to say, if this is the boundary for me, here's what I'm going to do. If this is not within the realm of what I am boundaried around, or however we want to say it. But yeah, I think it's in this life. Here's like, you can take this to the bank because it's the only fact I know for sure. The only person that we get to control in this life is ourselves, period. Mm-hmm. And I think so much of what has been the continuous struggle in our relationship dynamics is that we just believe if I can just control this other person, or if I can just get them to comply with who I need them to be for me to be okay, then I will exhale. And our soul is just never going to be in cooperation with that. That's just, your soul's like, nah, we're not outsourcing our power like that, girl. That's not going to happen,
And it's so that's huge because we don't hear that often. And I really appreciate that. I resonate with that so deeply. Again, it always comes back to self, right? It's the inner shapes the outer. So it's just a really powerful perspective and, dare I say, truth.
Listen.
Okay. Where is my eyes are like tearied from imagining Scott working himself out.
So good.
Okay. How we begin to access authentic power. Authenticity is the biggest part of the conversation with me always.
Yeah.
And so I really am excited to hear you expand on this.
Yeah. One of my favorite spiritual teachers is Gary Zukav, and he talks about authentic power in the space of when our personality comes to meet our essence, our soul, right? And that is when we are in the space of authentic power. And it's sort of that power from within versus exactly what we were talking about, that thing of thinking that I need anything external to come into the space of power. That will always be an illusion. And so authentic power is just that space of trusting in all the things, like the divine unfolding of life, my story up to this point, who I am, and my particular brand of magic. And I find that when we're in that space of trust, it's fire. It's like everything.
Because nothing, you're just going for it. With 2 feet in, right? Like all you, all in.
That's it.
Yeah. You have some retreats coming up, right? Let's talk about that for a second, because I think those are important, and I think that there's a lot of individuals who would really love to know about it and come hang out with you.
Thanks for sharing about that. Yeah, I love that. And I do think more than ever, what I'm feeling the pull to more now than individual client work is coming back into community. I find that there's just so much potent transformation that happens when when we come together in fellowship, and to me, what's fascinating about it is this is a part of the remembrance of our feminine. You know, there was a time when especially women used to sit together in circles, and we used to really tune into the wisdom of the earth and our own innate gifts and power.
Yeah.
And a patriarchal structure sort of pulled us out of that space, called us witches, burned us alive, right?
Yeah.
Like all of those things. And in the reclaiming of that, I think we are coming back into what is it to sit together and remember just who we are, you know? And I think regardless of gender, I think more than ever, I'm obsessed with this. And I don't know if you feel this, but that next year to me is really about us coming back into the space of unity consciousness and how we just remember how we are so much not only more alike than we are different, but also that we really do need one another, that we are this like these interconnected beings, and that it's always possible for us to bridge the gap in understanding. And I really feel compelled to like share the tools that I've utilized to get into that space of not being afraid to sit with people who might feel very differently than I do about something. And I'm like, great, let's share. Tell me about it, right?
Yeah.
And I think we really need to expand our capacity to tolerate doing that, because a lot of that is nervous system work, because stuff comes up and I start to feel afraid and activated, and it's like, of course we do. And that doesn't mean that we have to bolt or shut down or villainize other people. We can stay in our body in curiosity. But we really need tools to learn how to do that. So I do a lot of retreats, and you can check out my website, DeneLogan.com, for, you know, the details of them. But thank you for sharing, because I love them more than anything else. It's
of
my favorite
course.
thing
I feel
to do.
like we'll do something together, because I've got things coming up. I'm calling it out. You heard it here first.
I would love that. I would love to come visit Vegas too. So.
Yeah, I know. There's so much fun stuff to do. Vegas is just so special. It's like, it's whatever you want it to be, you know, but it's an accommodation city. So you can have a lot of fun. Last question. And thank you so much before I even go there. Like, honestly, you are truly a force. You are a gift of wholeness. And you're the real thing. Like, your energy is just palpable. It's beautiful. It's medicinal.
Well, recognized game, girl.
It's so true. For, you know, I'll just say this before we started recording, you know, I was saying to you, because again, we met years ago, me coming into your incredible yoga class, and you held the room. There was an energy. I've been doing yoga forever, and, you know, did all over from New York. And then there's those ones, and you're those ones that where you go in, and what it was, Dene, is that I felt that everyone in the room was there to be in space with you, that you had a connection with all of us in there. And so it was like, it wasn't just, you know, vinyasa or, you know, it was like there was some shit happening. So it's really special to be here with you now, all these years later. And, you know, we didn't see this coming, and but here we are. And I truly hope and believe that this is one of several conversations that we will continue to have. And I'm just really grateful for everything that you shared here with me, with all of us, but also for just how you're showing up in the world and what you're putting out in the world. Because again, sovereign love, I mean this truly with my whole heart, that this book has massive legs, and it's going to do a lot for a lot of people right on time. Fucking A.
It's like drinking that in for a minute. Thank you, Roxanne. And truly, it's such a mirror to your unbelievably beautiful essence that you would feel and see that. So thank you for that, and thank you for who you are. And just such a tremendous honor and a privilege to reconnect. I'm so happy to know you and again to have you back in my sphere.
Just last question: is there anything that hasn't been said that you think would be great to live in this conversation?
Oh, that feels like
I know, no pressure.
You know, I think more than ever, our work is just remembering who we are, and who we are is love. We just are. It's just that simple. And I think right now, more than ever, I'm just like, y'all, that's our work. Like, how do I be love? How do I remember love over and over, forever and ever, amen? Like, how do I ask myself how I can be love in this moment? You know?
That's a good one. Everyone journal that. how can I be love in this moment?
Right? Thank you.
That's what, thank you. To all my tender savages, to all you self-lovers, to all you magnetic badasses who are showing up every day authentically, courageously, who refuse to play small, I'm so excited to introduce our new lifestyle brand, La Rowan Paw, because we designed it just for you. Who's we? We is my work wife / wingwoman / badass graphic artist, Paulina Stewart. Every design is a culmination of deep intention, love, fire, magic, heart, and soul brought to life through my writing and Paulina's graphic work. Because we are so intentional about every single statement, every design, we only drop one design a month. We want you to live it. We want you to feel the essence and the frequency of every design because they are so powerful, like you. So check it out, larowanpaw.com. It's in the show notes. The new drop is so sick, and I cannot wait to see all of you wearing it. You get a variety of products to choose from in each drop. So wear it on your head, hat. You can get socks. You can wear a hoodie. You can hang it on your wall. Whatever you end up doing, please do let us know by sharing it on your socials and your stories. Tag at Roxy Look, tag La Rowan Paw, and we will reshare the powerful, magnetic, badass beauty that you are. LaRowanPaw.com.